Welcome to lecture 23 on the digestive system. Let's get started. So on the first slide we have here, it's a nice breakdown of the components of the digestive system. So this is everything inclusive of your salivary glands within the mouth, your pharynx, the esophagus, your liver, pancreas, small intestine, large intestine, all of that here. This is referred to as the alimentary canal. The alimentary canal is the entire system from start to finish of the passageway of food. So I'll go into more detail about that in the next slides, but this is a good visual depiction of our entire digestive system. So the digestive system here again is referred to as the alimentary canal. Aliment means to nourish. So remember, the food we digest, the food we are eating, is used to nourish our body. Our body will convert that food into usable energy. So this system is very useful for nourishing our body. This is also referred to as the gastrointestinal tract or the GI tract. Again, the primary function is to nourish the body. So this is inclusive of your mouth, the pharynx, esophagus, our stomach, the small and large intestines, and the anus. So this all here is part of the alimentary canal. Our food will pass by the accessory structures of the teeth and tongue as part of mechanical digestion, salivary glands for chemical digestion, and then the gallbladder, liver, and pancreas will also release secretions. This will include usually bile and other enzymes, amylase and lipase, and these are all help in the digestive process. So here is the actual histology of the alimentary canal. So when we're looking at this canal, we're going to start from the lumen here. That is the middle portion of this smooth muscle of the GI tract. You're going to start from there and move outward. So here's the mucosa layer. From there you move to the submucosa, which is the layer beneath the mucosa. Then we have the muscularis, and then lastly is the serosa. So this is a very good just visual depiction. You can see here you have the nerve fibers. It's very vascular with the veins and the arteries. So it's a good rich blood supply, very innervated as well from this picture, and I will cover each of these in further detail. So the first layer we're going to be focusing on is the mucosa layer. So the mucosa layer here, I'll just give you a quick little look at it. Remember, that's that first layer moving outward from the lumen. So the mucosa layer is responsible for secreting mucus, digestive enzymes, and hormones. It will absorb the end products of digestion. So this is including the carbohydrates, which get broken down into the monosaccharides, like glucose, fructose, your proteins, which are into amino acids, and then the fats, which get broken down into glycerol and fatty acids. This also protects against infectious diseases and is composed of sublayers of the epithelium, lamina propria, and the muscularis mucosae. So the epithelium here, a really great way to remember that it is simple columnar epithelium is because the digestive tract, if you look back to the integumentary system lecture, the GI tract is covered in non-ciliated simple columnar epithelium tissue. So that'll really help you keep that in mind. This layer here also is responsible for mucus secreting cells. Then if we move on to the lamina propria, it's composed of loose areolar connective tissue, and there's lots of capillaries here for nourishment and absorption, if you remember looking at that picture I showed you on the last slide. So again, with connective tissue, it is a living extracellular matrix, and most connective tissue does have varying levels of vascularity, but in this case, because of the capillaries, it is very blood rich and has that good supply there. Then we move to the muscularis mucosae, and this is composed of smooth muscle, which will produce movements of this mucosa layer. So the smooth muscle here is responsible for contractions of the mucosa layer. All right, then next, moving outward, we have the submucosa layer. Again, that is the layer directly beneath the mucosa. So the submucosa layer is composed of dense connective tissue. This includes the blood and lymphatic vessels, lymphoid follicles, and submucosal nerve plexus. So again, dense connective tissue. In this case, it's very vascular. There's a very rich blood supply, hence the blood and lymphatic vessels. And with the submucosal nerve plexus, this area would be very innervated. It's a very ganglionated, rich, network of nerve fibers. And this is also referred to, the submucosal nerve plexus is also referred to as Meissner's plexus. So this would be innervated by the vagus nerve fibers. So that would be like, the esophagus, the stomach, pancreas, small intestine, large intestine. That's where you'll find these nerve fibers. So remember, it's just a dense collection of ganglionated nerve fibers. Right, then next we are at the muscularis externa and the serosa. So the muscularis externa is responsible for segmentation, which is the process by which chyme is, it's separated within the stomach, and then it's, pushed back together. It's kind of a mixing and a churning process, and this really helps with digestion and absorption. And then it also is responsible for peristalsis, which is the involuntary movement, or I should say contractions of the stomach walls to create alternate waves, which kind of helps, relax and contract the stomach to push the food through the digestive system. This has in the inner circular and outer longitudinal layers, the myenteric nerve plexus, which is really responsible, for like the velocity and intensity of the muscle contractions to move that food through the stomach. Those nerves are responsible for that. And then there's some sphincters, around some of the muscular regions. Then in the serosa, which is the visceral peritoneum. Remember, peritoneum is just the this type of like skin that encapsulates most muscles of the abdominal system and your digestive tract. This layer of visceral peritoneum, it overlies a layer of loose connective tissue. So this would really be found particularly in like the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, all of which have a very dense sheath of collagen called the adventitia. Right, so just a quick recap. So this nerve supply that is in the GI tract is in an enteric nervous system. It is intrinsically innervated. So again, this will include the myenteric plexus, or the plexus of Auerbach, and the submucosal plexus, or as I've already mentioned, the plexus of Meissner. So the myenteric plexus, again, it's in the muscularis layer, and it's responsible for the motility of your gut. And it helps with the rhythm and the force of the contractions of that muscularis layer to really kind of help, get the food moving and just help your stomach kind of pass that system. Then for the submucosal plexus, this is in the submucosal layer, and it's responsible for regulating like the digestive secretions, and it actually reacts to the presence of food. So once food is present, your body will start, releasing those secretions to kind of help break down that food and get it ready to move forcefully throughout the GI tract. And then extrinsic innervations, it's provided by the autonomic nervous system. All in all, there's really about 6 digestive processes. So starting from the top here at the beginning of the mouth is the ingestion of food. Then we're moving our way down, which is this blue line right here. That is the propulsion phase. So that is going to include everything from swallowing, peristalsis, as I already explained. Peristalsis will occur, in the esophagus here, within your stomach, the small intestine, and large intestine. Then as we continue to have that food move past the stomach, you see these little green dots here. That is chemical digestion. So your pancreas, will release, amylase and lipase. Amylase is responsible for breaking down starches, and lipase is responsible for breaking down fats. So those are just a few of the secretions that are part of chemical digestion. Then we move our way through with these little pink swirls. That is the mechanical digestion. Again, that starts way up at the mouth. As you can see, the processes all intertwine with each other. But so you start with the chewing at the top here of the mouth, then the churning of the stomach, as you see these big swirls here. Then we have the segmentation, which I also explained that definition already, of the chyme, being mixed and pulled back and forth, brought back together in the small intestine, which is right here. Then we go to the absorption phase, which is where the nutrients and water go to the blood vessels and lymph vessels. That is done primarily from the small intestine. And then in the large intestine, the water that we absorb from our food goes to blood vessels. So that's in that large intestine. And then lastly, defecation. That's what happens when you have to use the bathroom. All that food that did not get used or absorbed comes out as waste.
All right, and then just to give you a quick glimpse into the mouth, I'm not going to cover this too much, just because, again, we have a lot more other important parts we got to cover. But just to kind of show you, these are all the different components of our mouth. I will go into the salivary glands and where those are in just a moment, because the mouth itself is really responsible for both mechanical and chemical digestion. Mechanical because of the teeth. Your teeth are responsible for chewing, mastication. And then the salivary glands are responsible for releasing, the chemicals, the digestive enzymes of salivary amylase, which again is meant to break down carbohydrates, so starches, and then the salivary lipase, which will break down fats. Then with the tongue, I won't say too much on this either, but it is important for the sense that it's also part of mechanical digestion. It helps to reposition food between your teeth, so like when you're chewing, your tongue is there to kind of help move the food back, and it'll help you with the saliva and your chewing motion that creates the bolus, and that's the food that actually goes down, your esophageal tube, and will get processed throughout the digestive system. Your tongue also contains taste buds, and it's also responsible for the muscles of the tongue will help to change the shape of the tongue as you're chewing to move that food in your mouth. Continuing with the digestive processes, these are the salivary glands, part of the mouth. So these are constantly secreting saliva. So as I mentioned, the salivary amylase, it's responsible for initiating the breakdown of the carbohydrates. So starches are a form of carbohydrates, and that's what the amylase in saliva will do. So here's a quick overlook of our parotid salivary gland with its associating duct, the sublingual ducts. So that's going to be below the tongue, and the sublingual salivary gland is over here. Then you have the submandibular salivary gland and the submandibular duct. So the submandibular glands, to start with that, those are responsible for secreting saliva into the mouth through the submandibular duct, right? It's under your mouth, okay? And then again, the sublingual glands, those lie below the tongue, and you're going to use the lesser sublingual ducts to secrete saliva into our oral cavity as we're chewing food. Then lastly, the parotid gland up here, the biggest one right here, that is between the skin and the masseter muscle, which is right near our ears. And that will secrete saliva into the mouth through this duct right here, the parotid duct, and it's located near our second upper molar of our tooth. And looking in the tooth itself, I'll keep it rather short because, again, I feel like we have a little bit more to cover, but this is still important as it is part of the mechanical digestion. So here is the tooth. You know, you have your crown of the tooth, the neck, the root right here. These are specifically the root canals. As you can see, it's very vascular with lots of arteries and veins. Here's the nerve, so it's very innervated. If you've ever heard of a root canal or have personally had to have a root canal, you know how painful that is because they have to go into this part of your tooth to take care of that infection. So the gingivae are the gums. That is what actually holds the neck of the tooth in place. It surrounds it. Then we have the periodontal ligament right here. That helps to also hold the teeth in these sockets right here. The crown of the tooth is the part that actually protrudes out of your gums. You can see them. And the root itself here will be embedded within the maxilla and the mandible. So those are the parts you won't actually get to see. And then continuing forward, yep, we have more parts here. Again, the gingival sulcus would be right here. It's not labeled in this picture, but it would be right in this area between the neck and the gingivae. The pulp cavity, it has this loose connective tissue where a lot of nerves and blood vessels run through it. Again, it's highly innervated and highly vascular, good rich blood supply and lots of nerve fibers. Then the dentin is responsible for surrounding the pulp cavity here. Cementin, it covers the dentin in the root. And then the enamel is what covers the crown. This is the hardest substance in the body, actually. So, you know, if you've ever heard your dentist talk to you about, you know, you're losing enamel, that hard surface, and we need to protect it, that's because once that enamel is lost, it will not come back. But it is one of the hardest substances in our body, and if we can protect it, it'll keep our teeth nice and healthy for a long time. And then we just have a super fast visual right here just to show you. This is where the pharynx would be right here. The oropharynx, remember that's the opening of the pharynx to the esophagus here. But yeah, then we have our larynx, the epiglottis, glottis right here, the soft palate of the mouth, and the hard palate. So as you can see by the colors, it's broken down by the nasal cavity, oral cavity, pharynx, and larynx. And we'll continue from there. The esophagus here, as I pointed out in that last diagram, so that works very closely with the pharynx. So the esophagus is that large muscular tube. It connects to the pharynx, or connects the pharynx to the stomach. So when you digest or when you ingest food, that food goes straight from your esophagus, the pharynx, to the stomach. It's a straight line down. So this entire tube is lined with stratified squamous epithelium. It is very long. And it is located posterior to the trachea. So again, just to give you a quick visual depiction, remember that. Here's the trachea, and then your esophagus is going to be right here. Okay? So from there, oops, I'm right here. Sorry for that quick little delay there. But yes, so there's an upper esophageal sphincter. This will continue with the inferior pharyngeal constrictor. And this basically is responsible. It helps to control the movement of food from the pharynx into the esophagus. So it helps you keep food, you know, above that until it's ready to be sent down the esophageal tube. You know, you don't want food being sent in too soon. So this sphincter here, along with the inferior pharyngeal constrictor, helps to control the movement of the food from the pharynx into the esophagus. Then the lower esophageal sphincter, which is also called the gastroesophageal or cardiac sphincter. This is what allows food to pass from the esophagus into the